Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Congressman Jake Ellzey, co-chair of the For Country Caucus. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Brittany. It's always an honor to be able to talk about what me and my colleagues on both sides of the aisle as veterans are doing for our nation's security and for our veterans.
These are two of my favorite types of conversations. A, conversations with veterans, because as I shared with you earlier, I come from a family of veterans. But B, conversations where I can hear and we can hear lawmakers working together, working across the aisle, especially in these deeply what seem like highly partisan times. So you're leading the For Country Caucus with your colleague, Congressman Don Davis. It's a bipartisan effort that was founded about 5 years ago. So can you talk to us about the group's goals and what you've worked on over the past couple of years?
Well, Don is a remarkable man, a Democrat, a veteran, and we have approximately 40 members throughout both sides of the aisle in this next Congress for the 119th, who all aim to work together on being as nonpartisan as possible. We are bipartisan because we're all Republicans and Democrats, but national security and care for our veterans, as well as outfitting our military personnel with the best equipment that we can, is our primary goal. And it's funny because even though we've got 40 members, which is a pretty large bipartisan group and a bipartisan caucus, and most people don't know who we are. Why is that? Because we believe in quiet professionalism and we work behind the scenes to affect good legislation throughout the country. In fact, somebody asked me last week who didn't have any idea what the For Country Caucus was. They said, "Which four countries?" And I said, well, it's probably a misnomer. We ought to probably come up with a better marketing name for it, but it's For Our Country. And we all get along as veterans do. You know, veterans have a unique language, as your grandfather would tell you, is that when veterans get together, it really doesn't matter the era, the conflict they were in, the years that they were in. They all get together, usually signified by a hat. And we have a certain way of talking to each other and a certain sense of humor that only those who have served can truly understand. Most civilians who haven't served would hear our way that we talk to each other and truly love on one another through insults is actually kind of takes people aback. But that's how we communicate with each other. And it's a safe place for all of us to get because we speak the language of what it's like to be a veteran.
I love hearing that. And when I've had conversations with my grandfather, when I have conversations with my uncle who is an Air Force veteran, I always love bringing my problems to them because something about veterans, they're always measured. They're always solutions oriented.
That's right.
There's no flair for dramatics. And I mean, that's understated by you saying, hey, we're not really a highly publicized group here. So take us into those conversations. Aside from the ribbing, what do they look like and how are you working together?
We have a number of folks who come to talk to us. We've had thus far in the last year, we've had almost every member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff come speak to our group and avail themselves to have a discussion and questions about what they need going forward. And so that's one way we start. And then we all collaborate on good legislation, good ideas. Veterans and military members tend to break things down to the fundamentals, break issues down to the fundamentals, then find the simplest solution to accomplish the mission. It sounds quite simple, but in government, that is remarkably difficult to do. And so, you know, Don is, so we'll start out with the insults. Don's an Air Force guy. My friend August Fleury was an F-22 pilot, and I was an F-14, F-18, and H-60 pilot. So we have to talk about the insults, starting off, then that's our opening gambit. And then we'll say, how do we do things better? How do we make sure that our future forces are equipped against a sixth-generation foe like China, who only recently has flown two Generation 6 looking aircraft? What are we going to do about those veterans who fought for multiple deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq over the course of 20 years? How are they taken care of? What problems do we have emanating from those conflicts, burn pits, radars in fighter aircraft? How do we address those issues together and make it nonpartisan? Because, you know, when I was serving, I didn't care who was flying next to me as long as they were good, as long as it was merit-based, as long as they were lethal. And I had folks from all different backgrounds flying on my wing in my fighter squadron. So that is the bare essential of what it is, because if you ask any of us, job number one of any government is protection of the citizens that live there, whether it's state, local, municipal, or federal. And at the federal level, it's the Defense Department and it's the VA. So how do we best serve those who are serving and who have served?
your colleague, Congressman Don Davis, said pretty much the exact same thing, that when he was serving, no one cared who was the commander-in-chief. They were the commander-in-chief. Didn't matter if they were Republican or Democrat. That was priority number one. So what are you working on in this term, in this 119th Congress? What's on the docket when it comes to national security and when it comes to veterans, especially because this group has such insight into what veterans need?
Absolutely. Well, it's continued finding better ways to fund the VA and address issues that we're finding out every day. Every conflict brings its own problems for those veterans who have served. We didn't know about the burn pits until the late, around 2010, when the burn pits had been going on in Iraq, and I had served in Iraq on the ground, and we threw everything into a burn pit of all different types. We didn't know how caustic that would be, how deadly that could be for various members, and how a lot of members could get cancer from that, while others didn't. So those are just a start. And as we start this new Congress with a new administration, those are things that we're in the process right now of finding out what's important to all 40 of our members, what can be bipartisan, what can be nonpartisan, what can get the support of the entire group, and then we'll work behind the scenes as necessary to get good legislation passed. So it's a whole new world. We've got a changeover in commander-in-chief and different priorities from the last administration. So, but I will say this, that most of the guys all the folks that are a member of the For Country Caucus, men and women, we have great senses of humor, and we love one another because we sign our names on the bottom line when nobody asked us to, when we didn't have to. And so we've got that shared commonality amongst us. And so 3 or 4 big pieces of legislation is what we're going to start with, and we'll be seeing those in the next couple of months.
I think it's great that when you're in this room together, all of you all can work together for whatever cause you're going for. And I'm wondering how that trickles out when you're with all of your colleagues in the House, all 435 of you guys. What do those conversations look like? Because right now, Republicans are in a good spot. They have slim majorities in the House and the Senate, as well as there's a Republican president. But you obviously still need to work together with Democrats. So what do your conversations with Democrats look like?
They look largely the same, and then we'll add on an insult of them being in the other party and asking them to cross over to come to our party, that they'll do the same thing. But there is a widespread respect amongst the civilian populace and up here on the Hill that if somebody's a veteran and they're commiserating with somebody from the opposite party who's also a veteran, that's okay. That is immediately, that gets us a pass, and they know ultimately that those of us who have stood side by side for the betterment of our country, that's the only thing that we're interested in going forward. And that's why I say we try to find nonpartisan things, because name me somebody who isn't interested in protecting our country. That is a nonpartisan issue because we're Americans. And so, but it also brings greater collegiality, and outside of the For Country Caucus builds relationships on both sides of the aisle that I think the American people are always interested in. And they want to respect the military, and they want to respect our veterans. And when they see veterans communicating and in a bipartisan manner, that's really important to them. And I hear that on the street. You don't see it much on the news, but it's important to Americans that those who served can get along and still accomplish the mission, because they rely on us to do it in the military in uniform, and they rely on us to do it on the Hill too, wearing a suit and tie.
Well, I know I need to say this, but on behalf of myself as well as all of our viewers, I want to thank you for your service. And I want to talk about Donald Trump's cabinet picks as it relates to national security and defense. The president's picked Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe as CIA Director, Pete Hegseth as Defense Secretary, and Michael Waltz as National Security Advisor. What do you make of these picks when you're seeing Donald Trump's first few weeks in office and when you see him assembling his administration?
He has got his definite ideas on how he wants things to work up here. John Ratcliffe, I have gotten to know a little bit. He's going to be a fantastic DCI. Mike Waltz, I know very, very well, and I've campaigned with Mike, and I knew him back when he ran the first time. He was successful, and I wasn't. And I've gotten to know him as a legislator and as a defender of this country. And so I'm going to focus mainly on Mike Waltz and point out something about his background that makes him incredibly well suited to the job of National Security Advisor. As you well know, the National Security Advisor is not a job that has to be confirmed by the Senate. But let's go back to his very beginnings. He was a Green Beret. What is the role of a Green Beret? In most cases, yes, they do direct action missions, but they also learn a foreign language. They embed themselves with a community and a different culture that is not American. They will get accepted by that community. They will spend months and months with them learning their language, learning their customs, and then ultimately training them for their own self-defense. That's a very strategic role as opposed to a tactical kick down the door and take somebody out. So Mike Waltz, his entire career has been a strategic one in bringing a lot of groups together and learning their culture and getting their trust so that they can well defend themselves. So let's look at the National Security Advisor role. He's got to bring state, defense, the intelligence communities, all these different groups that may or may not have the same alignment, the same ideas about what they want to do. He'll bring those groups together to find the best solution for the security of the United States. So back when he was a young first lieutenant and captain, Mike Waltz was doing the same thing he is now, just on a much bigger stage. So I can't say enough good things about Mike Waltz. I deeply admire him. He's the perfect guy for the job right now. And then Donald Trump is carrying out the promises that he said all along. Pete Hegseth, now confirmed as the Secretary of Defense, is only interested in merit and lethality. And I've been saying that for years, so I'm right in line with Pete Hegseth, and I look forward to seeing what he does going forward.
When you're looking at these picks, what do you think this indicates about where the president's head is at when it comes to national security and when it comes to defense?
He wants the best and the brightest to do the jobs that he sees fits, and he's met all of these folks, and he's got as the executive, he's got the opportunity to pick the people that he wants in these roles. And if you'll notice, a lot of them are in their early to mid 40s. So he is looking at the next generation of leadership to ensure that the next 30 years of the United States, we are far more secure than we were over the last 4 years. So I highly admire that. And he won the popular vote, and he won by today's standards a landslide. And he has the opportunity and the right to pick the folks that he wants working with him on national security issues.
One of the top issues facing voters, and a sentiment I hear a lot, was border security, and border security is national security. I think you would probably agree with that sentiment, you being a representative from Texas. So I would love to pick your brain a little bit about the president's latest moves when it comes to immigration, because we saw just after he was sworn into office, he signed a flurry of executive orders on the border. He announced many actions on the border. Some of them include mass deportations, reinstating Remain in Mexico, ending CBP-1, declaring a national emergency at the southern border, and changing the definition of birthright citizenship, just to name a few.
Right.
What do you think about President Trump's actions when it comes to his first few weeks and immigration and border security?
Let's start with history. In World War II, we lost 300 Americans every day fighting tyranny and evil overseas. 300 Americans every day. Today, from drug overdose and fentanyl poisoning, we are losing 300 Americans every day in our bedrooms and our backyards. Of that 300, 200 is fentanyl poisoning, meaning it's a poisoning. Most folks don't even know that they're taking it. All these chemicals are coming from China, put together by the cartels, and they're killing Americans in our own bedrooms and our backyards. China needs this because they have a population problem and a looming problem with the collapse of their entire society based on the one-child policy. So nothing happens in China without Xi Jinping knowing. So somebody is exporting chemicals that are trying to kill Americans, which, find me somebody who doesn't believe that is the most adversarial relationship we have is that with China, and then brought about by the cartels. These cartels are definitely our enemies. I'm glad that he said that they are a terrorist organization because they are killing Americans within America. And so I'm very pleased that we have said that this is an emergency, and I've been saying it for a long, long time. But they're killing Americans every day. If we lost an airplane every day, a 777 or the like, or an A350 that had 300 people on board every day, we would say that is a problem. If that happened 365 days a year, that's the equivalent of what we're losing to drugs and fentanyl from foreign countries right now. So that's 70,000 Americans every year, and that's age 18 to 49. That is the future of our country that's being killed by foreign countries right now. So this is an emergency. So I'm glad he's taking those steps.
You're from Texas. You're from a border state. I know I've had conversations where people say every state's a border state, but you're from Texas. So Is there any other action you would like to see? What do your constituents make of these current actions? I know we're only in week 3.
Well, we find out what's important to our constituents in District 6. District 6 is just south of Dallas, encompasses a little bit of Dallas, but it's largely rural to the south and southeast of Dallas. And the number one issue for my constituents is border security, because when things come up from the border, they come up through our highways. We've got 3 freeways going through my district. They bring all of the things that we don't want. The evil of human trafficking up through the border, the fentanyl and drugs, and then illegal immigration. So it is an immense concern as we have to try to find a way to not go broke from taking care of folks at hospitals and putting them in schools. So that's our number one issue in the country, but this is circulated throughout our country, not to mention the gangs from Central and South America who are infiltrating our streets with those drugs, trafficking in those people, as well as trafficking in weapons. So all of our communities are less safe because of the border. So the more, I enjoy watching Tom Homan. I enjoy the way he delivers the news, because people can identify with the anger and the concern that we have for our southern border and the security of the United States, but the welfare of our children and our communities. So I'm excited to see what happens, and we're only 2 weeks into this administration, so let's keep on going.
President Trump over the weekend brought up the border in a potential tariff conversation with Canada, with Mexico, and with China. He paused the tariffs on both Mexico and Canada. He implemented an additional 10% tariffs on China. What do you make of the tariff conversation, and how does that relate, do you think, to national security?
The tariff conversation is a way for him to bring attention to other nations or the concerned parties that we need to renegotiate whatever we've got going on, because the tariffs weren't about tariffs. The tariffs were about border security. It's how Donald Trump talks, and when you find out what's important to him, he says he says, if you're taking advantage of us, we're going to put the pressure on you. He doesn't want long-term tariffs. He wants people to be serious about negotiating with the United States about our security, about not dumping cheap goods on our shores, losing American jobs because the Chinese dump everything. And so, no, we're going to put a stop to that. Let's negotiate about it. And that's exactly what he's done. And they've been put a hold on both of these countries because they can't absorb those tariffs as well as we can. Nobody wants them. Donald Trump doesn't want them. But it's difficult to get the point across to some people unless you put an economic penalty on them, because 35% of Mexico's exports come to the United States. Only 1.5 of ours go to them. So yes, we're incredible trading partners, but they rely more on that than we do. And so let's get their attention. For many, many years, the Mexican government has either been overrun or co-opted by cartels. And so I think it's important that they finally get the message clearly that we won't tolerate the deaths of Americans anymore because of the weakness and their inability to cooperate in fighting against the cartels and preventing illegal immigration and preventing fentanyl and drugs crossing our border.
Mexico had promised to send thousands of National Guard troops to the border. Canada reiterated a border plan that was set into motion back in December. How effective do you think these negotiations were? And do you think, because of this 30-day pause, the border is more secure, both our northern and southern border?
They got the point, didn't they? And hold on the tariffs. He did that on a Friday. He gave them 3 days to negotiate. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They were supposed to go into action on Tuesday, or come into effect on Tuesday. So he did it on Friday. The markets weren't in session. He gave the Mexicans and the Canadians a chance to come back to the table and help fix this problem, and they did. And suddenly the waters are smooth again. So that's effective leadership right there. And I think all Americans should be proud that he's willing to take a stand to secure our border and make our country stronger. And our friends are always going to be our friends. You know that. But we do need to negotiate on how it is exactly that relationship is conducted. And certainly in the case of our neighbor to the south, it's been fraught with corruption and an inability to protect our southern border for the last 5 years. Now they have a new president. She's got a new chance to make amends with the United States, and I think that's good. I think that's healthy.
What do you make of people then, or critics rather, saying this isn't so much the art of the deal, this was Trump essentially folding, maybe he showed himself to be a paper tiger because nothing, do you think anything tangible, anything new was brought to the table over those past 3 days?
Absolutely, and we'll see the results over the next few months. Absolutely, yeah. He got what he wanted, right? He got what he wanted, and the tariffs didn't go into effect. He's really good at getting people's attention and making it noteworthy, and then saying, "Now let's talk." So he did that, and so that's purely effective. That speaks for itself.
Congressman, my last question to you is, what are you looking out for next when it comes to the For Country Caucus? Because I know you said, hey, we're not a highly publicized group. We like working together, quietly, together, in a nonpartisan way. What can we look out for, though, next?
Increased and improved and more efficient defense spending, and increased and improved and more efficient spending for our veterans. Not all veterans' needs are the same, and finding out how best to work with the VA and with the Defense Department and other entities to ensure that we are the most lethal fighting force that's ever existed, as we still are, but we are meeting the challenges of the future, as well as, and I've said this a lot, I spent a lot of time in combat, both in the air and on the ground, spent some time with SEAL Team 5. I was a pilot assisting them with air support. Most of us who are in the For Country Caucus have experienced war. Most of us believe that is a last resort. Most of us believe that war is something that if you do the things right beforehand, you won't get into one. So I think that's where our attention is focused. And as our new threats emerge all over the place, the warfare of the 2025 is different than the warfare of 2020 with the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And the manifestation of drone warfare as a leading edge technology that is extremely lethal. We've got to meet those challenges head on. And so what we need to do within our Defense Department is get rid of the barriers to progress and quick development of new weapons systems, get the Pentagon out of the way so that we can be leading the charge so that we prevent that war. But if called upon, we do win it. But technology is changing so rapidly that we have our need for our primes, we have our need for our ships, our aircraft carriers, our carrier-borne aircraft, but we also have a new need for the cyber realm capabilities, as well as drone technology and other unmanned capabilities. So we've got to keep leading the way, and we can't let the Pentagon get in the way of that kind of progress by keeping projects going for a decade that need to be and can be developed in a year at much less cost, with a lot fewer requirements, and continuing to work with the Defense Department to do that.
Congressman, I really appreciate you and your time today and this wide-ranging conversation. I'm excited to see what the For Country Caucus is working on next. You are welcome back anytime, and I hope we can have another conversation soon. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Brittany. It's been a pleasure.